Well, welcome everyone to another episode of GRUKology. I'm Michael Cochran, minister at Gloucester. I've got with me Darren Moore, minister at Chelmsford. And I think we've done two parts before, but it's great to have Tomi back again because we just got talking and kind of just, ran out of time. I mean, the funny part is we actually had a reason we wanted to talk, and we didn't even get to that in the first episode. So...
and you can now see as well that, my beard's trimmer, we're all wearing different things. So if people watch part one and then this, then...
It's taken a while. Yeah, your beard is trimmed. Mine hasn't been trimmed. So time has elapsed between these two. But anyway, good to have you back, Tomi. And maybe for those who didn't catch up on the first one, if you could just give us a brief intro of who you are and where you are and what you're doing, because the what you're doing part is what we want to talk about in a moment.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Darren. Yeah, my name's Tomi. I am studying at Westminster Seminary, UK, up in Newcastle, though it's moving to Oxford in the next couple of months. I'm an intern at All Saints Presbyterian Church in Newcastle. And basically, I'm just really studying and giving people insight into what the seminary lifestyle is like and what it actually means to go to seminary, what sort of work that we do. And whilst I do that, like I say, interning at All Saints, I get to serve the church. I'm preaching regularly. I actually preached yesterday, started a new series on 1 Peter, and Lord willing, that will go well. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, briefly.
And we really enjoyed, we're not going to go over it again now, but go back and listen, because I think your journey to becoming a Christian, or at least, I've worked this out, to your theological trajectory, and you come from a Pentecostal background. I think what Michael and I enjoyed is that seeing how you've come to your current views, but also how you are kind of appreciative and warm about where you've come from. So there's stuff to learn from your roots, but you come very much decided on where you are now. So go back and hear about that. That was an interesting journey to listen to.
No, 100%. Yeah, it's important. Unity is very important. So.
Yeah.
Sure. I think. I mean, we won't get into it because we got into that, but I think it is worth saying that, it's like anything. I mean, you think of it in terms of culture. You think of it in the different branches of Christianity. There's usually something to learn from others, and it doesn't bode well. And I think especially for Reformed Christians, it doesn't bode well to be high and mighty and haughty, like we figured everything out. Like that just seems like out of any branch of Christianity, we should be the most humble and ready to look at our own sinfulness, our own, the noetic effect, the fact that our minds are not fully redeemed, to then see, hey, maybe we don't have it all figured out. That should be our posture. Reformed Twitter apparently says otherwise, but that's another podcast.
But it's because I am even more humble than you are. That's
true. Moses, I just love, Moses was the most humble man who ever lived. Signed, Moses. Anyway, so this is how we get off track. So Tomi, you run an Instagram feed, and we'll post that. And your Instagram feed is that it's trying to be a window into seminary. And so I guess the first question is, why are you doing that? And the second would be, assuming that the answer is there's some bit of you're enjoying it. What are you enjoying? Because I mean, I don't know about you, Darren, but minus the hard work, I really enjoyed seminary. I really found, I have a bachelor's in economics, and I struggled through that. But then when I got to seminary, and it was like, you can read church history, theology, Bible, I was like, this is great.
Yeah, I did an engineering degree, civil engineering, and I think I worked out from that wasn't my future. When I did theology, I mean, I just loved it. And I did a master's of theology later, historical theology, and that was on the job very much. And it was interesting because a lot of the people I went to seminary with, some of them were not from very academic backgrounds, but a lot of them were. There was a lot of Oxford and Cambridge people. There's a lot of people converted at the same Cambridge mission. And they often found it, what they said they found hard about theology was just what you've said, that you're going from like Greek to history to pastoral counselling, and they're pretty different subjects. But as an engineer, that's the kind of thing I was used to. Only this was possibly I was more gifted at, but also like way more interesting. So like way more interesting. Perhaps some of the things Tomi will say will touch on why it's more interesting. Because people have their geeky subjects, and that's fine. But there's something about the whole breadth of theology that is why maybe we found it more interesting than economics or engineering.
Yeah. So, well, I'm doing my, my Instagram account and just posting essentially snippets of what a day looks like at seminary or what a week looks like at seminary. Occasionally, if we have an intensive, I'll say this is what the intensive week looked like, and this is who was teaching, this is what we went through, here are some highlights, and these sorts of things. And now going into assignments, going into essays and exams and all these sorts of things. And the reason I'm doing that is because when I was considering seminary a number of years ago, I was looking online for what does seminary actually look like. And all you were really finding were promo videos from the seminaries saying, join our seminary. It's really interesting. You're going to really be formed into the man and the pastor that God wants you to be. And it's nice content and the camera is all nice and everything. And they're showing you the campus. And I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. And I do want to go to a seminary probably, but I don't actually know what's it actually going to entail. Now, the blessing for me was that I live in Newcastle and the seminary was only 1.5 miles from my house and just around the corner from where I was working. So I was actually able to go in and talk to people that were at the seminary, people like Jonathan Witch, the director, Manuel, who's one of the brothers here who's going into his final year. I was able to actually go in on my lunch breaks from my old job to sit in classes sometimes or a couple of times just to see what was actually going on. And so I could actually get a feel for it. I thought that actually helped so much to know what was actually going to happen at seminary, to see what a class would look like. Everybody was on their best behavior when I got there, obviously. They don't want to upset the new guy who's potentially joining and all this sort of stuff. But when I got there, I started recording, hey, this is my first day. I turned up to seminary in a hoodie and some Crocs. And then I found out there was a dress code. And so we haven't done this. The induction was like, here's the dress code. I was like, nice. Yeah. But
so did you meet the dress code or you had to change? Was Crocs and a hoodie on the dress code?
Well, they didn't tell me not to do it, but because it was there in the induction, I kind of took that as subtle hinting. So yeah, I just changed my outfit then. But it was doing that and recording that, people started saying, oh, I'm interested in seeing what your journey's like. And I thought, well, to be fair, I mean, I'm also going to want to look back at this one day and just see, oh, I remember those seminary days and it's good to get some footage of this. But then it's also just the opportunity to be able to share it with people and then also talk to people, post things where people might be looking, where I was looking when if they're interested in joining seminaries. And so to be able to do that, and then I've had a couple of people reach out to me and say, hey, I'm considering seminary. I see that you do this. Can you tell me about this? Would you be able to put me in contact with this person there? And it's really helpful to actually see those connections forming and see that it's actually helping people who are considering seminary training in the UK as well. So that's why I'm doing that, first and foremost.
That's great. So what is it that you have appreciated about seminary, and also maybe what surprised you?
Excellent questions. Before joining seminary, so let's do it this way. In 2022, when I felt like this kind of desire to start thinking about pastoral ministry, my thoughts were, I'm just going to sit here, read my books. The exact book I was thinking of actually is this one right here. Lewis Burkhoff, Systematic Theology. I'm just going to read through this and I'm going to know everything about theology. And then I'm going to find another book, read another book. And it was like, I'm not going to go to seminary. I don't need to do that. I'll just learn myself. And there are loads of people who don't go to seminary. And plus, I don't want to write essays. I just want to be in the Word and be in Burkhoff. That'll be me, sort of. But then, obviously, seminary was on my doorstep. And so I kind of checked it out and started thinking about it. And then when I finally made the decision to join, I guess I joined, and then started taking classes. And the things that I've really appreciated about seminary, I was telling somebody about this I think yesterday, are just the breadth and the depth of study that I would have just missed out on if I had just sat in my room, in my study, wherever I would have been in a library, reading what I wanted to read, not reading the things that I just wanted to read for myself, and missing out on all the things that are also actually important to read and to study for the ministry as well. So, for instance, the plan was read Burkhoff and then look at one of the footnotes and then read whatever systematic theology he recommended in that. And so my concept of theology at the time was just the Bible and systematic theology. Joining seminary opened my mind to confessionalism. It opened my mind to biblical theology. It opened my mind to church history. It opened my mind to the original languages as well. And having preached through Jonah recently in my church, and just having recently finished that series, I've seen so much value in having studied Hebrew for a couple of years to be able to draw things out of the text, which I've actually been able to use in the sermons. And then people have come and said that was so helpful. I'd never seen that before. I've never seen those parallels that you were able to draw out there. And if I had simply just stayed and studied by myself and not have actually gone to seminary, then I would have missed so many of those things out. So that's one thing in terms of theology. The second thing I would comment on would be the collegial atmosphere. It is so much fun being with brothers in the seminary who are studying toward the same goal, who are struggling through the same struggles, who are struggling through Hebrew exegesis, who are struggling through Greek exegesis, who are struggling through Donald John McLean's essays and all the stuff that he piles on our plates and all these things. But also just to be able to just go through that together, but also to relax together and just chat. Number of discussions we've had where everyone's busy, we've all got assignments, and then someone says, hey, what do you think about this verse? What do you think this means? What do you think about baptism? What do you think about covenant theology? And then we probably shouldn't, but we end up going for 45 minutes to an hour and a half sometimes, just talking about theology, get no work done, and then we're like, I need to get back to it. But the thing is, I always go home and I'm praying and I'm thankful to God that I get to have those conversations, because they actually are obviously the study and the study and the books and being in the Word. It's so formative. But I think that those conversations that I get to have with the brothers as well, they really help you to understand different perspectives that you kind of have caricatures of in your mind, and they help you to get the best out of your brother, and then also they help refine yourself as well. And so that's a huge thing that I was talking to Emmanuel, I said his name before, and he's from Germany, he's moving back to Germany soon. And he said that one of the biggest reason and the best reason that he appreciates seminary is because of the brotherhood and the conversations that we had. And that's something that I know I would have missed out on. Now, granted, back then I probably would have thought, oh, I don't care if I miss out on that. I'm a lone ranger, I'm a lone wolf, I do my own thing. But having experienced it, I'm so glad that I don't think that anymore. And I would say that to people who they're thinking about maybe whether I should do seminary, or they're thinking, well, I know people do it, but I don't want to do it. The brotherhood and the friendships that you build and the conversations you have are worth it. They're 100% worth it.
I used to think that I probably learned as much over tea and coffee as I did in the lecture room, and that makes it sound like the lecture room is rubbish. But it's not. I think it's partly talking about what you did in lectures, but also I think it's an interesting phrase you used of breadth and depth, and they're both useful. And so the breadth, I think, is helpful, that you realise that, I mean, you rattled off some of the subjects you've done, and there's others. So you just realise how much there is to theology. Mm. And also some of those go into enormous depth, and you start to I think what I enjoyed about the depth was it kind of, you can't go into depth in everything, but it gives you the skills that you can maybe later. So, and I've got some books here. So I've, after you finish seminary,
just a little bit of books back there.
Yeah. So I don't know if you can.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Goes that way. And there's some in front of me as well. And some of them I've read. So I suppose it's a bit like, if you'd been to a professional sporting academy, you need to keep on exercising and practicing, or else those muscles go flabby. And I must admit, my Hebrew muscles are are flabby. My son's learning Hebrew, and so that's challenged me. Yeah, so you see, and I described it, especially when I did my master's, it's a bit like saying you've got this door, say sacramental theology, and you go, I don't know as much of that as I should, and you go through the door and you realize you've just got a corridor of more doors of stuff you don't know.
Yeah.
And so that's quite humbling, which means it is a learning, but it kicks you off.
No, like, so I went to seminary kind of not sure of what the end would be. Like I kind of like had a roadblock in terms of what we were looking to do. And then seminary kind of cropped up and I said, actually, probably more training in this area is probably a good thing. And I think the one thing I would say with seminary, and I think it's probably worth caveating that there are, I know ministers who have not gone to seminary who are laboring and doing a fantastic job. And I think kind of, Tomi, what you've been saying is kind of what we try to get at is that, yeah, I mean, if you really look at the Bible, there's training that's needed, and Paul does this. But you could, to say seminary is mandatory to be a minister, I'm not sure I could go that far. No. Though, if you're in certain denominations, you'll have to, you will have to have a seminary degree. We can talk about that later, whether that's good or bad. But I do think it is fascinating, as you've been saying, is that entering seminary for me was, boy, I thought I knew theology. I'd read some of Calvin. I read some systematic theologies. I had a good, okay grasp of the Bible. And entering seminary, I went, I think it's in Kung Fu Panda where he goes, there is now a level 0. And it sort of feels like that. You go, I thought I was smart. And then I entered seminary and went, there's so much more. And that I will say that's the weirdest thing about seminary is, unlike under other master's degree, is its breadth is kind of can be daunting. But you also go, what would I take away? Like, what do I scrap? I think you need history, you need Bible, you need theology, you need languages, you need pastoral theology, you need count. So on the one hand, I kind of go, I don't know what I would get rid of if I needed to slim this down. But it is helpful. I mean, to think of doing ministry without having this knowledge. And I think what's also the second point I think is really great, Darren, that you made is that seminary shows you're not that smart, helps you to increase that. But to me, I think the most important thing is what you were getting at, Darren, is research methodology. I mean, honestly, at the world today, I'd say the one thing that could change the world is proper research methodology to how to evaluate arguments and how to go find appropriate sources in order to actually learn. And I think seminary, if that's what you get out of seminary, almost like that's the main goal in a sense, is how do I continue this trajectory?
Yeah. It's very humbling, isn't it? And then if you've been seeing this, Tomi, because you're a bright lad, as we established last time. But we had, when I was at Oak Hill, is where I went, which is an Anglican college, but it had a lot of independence. There was a couple of people with no academic background. She had left school at 16, gone into farming. One guy had been a bus driver and a prison officer, enormously gifted. I don't just mean like he could put a sermon together. I mean, he was just gifted in that sort of evangelistic and pastoral ministry. We also had these guys who had come out of Cambridge with a first, and they were obviously intelligent and could do a lot of their brains could do stuff that mine can't. But I remember one of them making a comment where, and I will protect the guilty by not saying their names, but saying to the principal, I got a first at Cambridge and I'm struggling to get everything done here. And the principal just going, so don't get a first. And just left it at that and just get over yourself. And, it's and I think the reasons why I picked the seminary that I did rather than some of the others I could have gone to is at the time it was I had to eventually do the job. So is it going to equip me to do that rather than sound good? So that's the end line, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's important. I remember we were sitting in a hermeneutics class last semester, and we were talking about how we've got all this work to do, all this seminary training and all the reading and we've got the exams and the essays. One of a few of the brothers were talking about, this is just so much work. And then one of our lecturers said that you can't make getting an A your idol.
Yeah.
A lot of you guys are serving in your churches. You've got families, you've got wives, you've got this, you've got that going on, and you're also training at seminary. An A grade can't be the point of this. Nobody's going to ask you what you got in your hermeneutics class when you're preaching and things like that. Then he kind of jokingly said, if you're single, then you've got no excuse. And I was kind of just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
He didn't know that at the time. He was like, oh, I'm kind of kidding. But yeah.
I had a conversation with a guy when I was in my second year, and he was a very bright guy, and he said to me, he got married at the end of the first year, and he said, we need, because I got married just before I started my first year, and he said, we've got to chat about how you cope with marriage and seminary. And I went, oh, okay, yeah. And he said, at the beginning of every module, you get a list of books to read, and I'm struggling to get through. I mean, let me help you there. That's for interest. That's for point of information for later. When I come back to this is, I can't read everything that they're giving me, and I actually think that's good preparation for ministry, because you can't do everything you want to do in ministry. Michael and I are both in relatively small churches, so often preaching twice, often leading a midweek, maybe doing something at CU. Doing other small groups, visiting, you have to make, and there's a bit of experience with this about, I can always prepare more, I can always do more, but this is going to have to be what I need so I can get the rest of the week done. And actually seminary is good training for that. That some people have higher capacity, some people already have a background in some of these things, so they don't need to put as much work in as others. But actually making those decisions of saying, I will get to a level of understanding that I can pass the paper. And it's a bit like learning to drive, isn't it? As someone said, you don't learn to drive when you pass your test. You've learned to not be a danger to others. And then the rest of your driving experience, you learn to drive. And I think pastoral ministry is a bit like that, that really what you're doing at the moment, Tomi, is making sure you're basically safe.
You're not a danger
that's right.
to others.
That's a very good analogy. I've not thought of it like that before. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting, because you're like, right, seminary really doesn't prepare you for ministry. Seminary should just say, yeah, you're not a danger. You understand history, you understand how to preach, and then ministry is that it's a lifelong process of learning to get better. Mm-hmm. I think that's right. That seminary helps you, almost like an intelligent sacrifice. To go, I can't do everything. So what do I need to do to get this done? Because that's exactly what pastoral ministry, especially in a small church, is like. 40 hours on a sermon, you're like, I don't know how that's even possible.
Mm-hmm. Although, having said that, to say the opposite, having been to seminary could make you very dangerous as well, because you could come away as a bit of a know-it-all. So, Tomi, how do you think your experience? I mean, I know some of the tutors who teach you. How do you think they're trying to make you not like that? I mean, obviously you're getting these skills in exegesis, a bit of biblical languages. No one's pretending you're the finished article in any of these things, but as well as the skills, what else? Is there anything else you think you're getting out of seminary?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that I'm gaining from seminary is the understanding that theology isn't just an intellectual piece of fun, but theology is pastoral, and it should lead to worship. And so what I've learned from our classes, so we'll have Donald John talking about creation, man, sin this past semester. We had Ian Hamilton, who teaches us about the Reformed Pastor course. He's taught us church history and these things. And one thing that you get in all of these classes is, okay, how does this apply to preaching? How does this apply to pastoral care? How does this apply to the church? This is not just a case of I'm reading all these books around this desk and in this room just so I can be like, yeah, I can answer that guy's question, or I can respond to this person in the debate. But this is actually going to impact people in the church. And so having the humility to say that I'm not doing this just for myself, but I'm doing this to serve the Lord, and I'm doing this for the purpose of serving God's church, that is something that I think is helping me, and that the professors and the staff at the seminary are really helping us to keep focused on and keep our eyes on. I think another thing is that our professors are just so much better than us, and it just keeps you humble. People just have questions. I can think of questions that I would have asked. I keep bringing up Donald John McClain. I don't know. It's genius, but I can think of questions that we just ask him. I remember reading about baptism and sacraments when I was considering Presbyterianism and all this sort of stuff. And I was reading one night about some random niche topic in one corner of one book, and I thought, man, I would love to hear more on this, but I don't know if anyone knows anything about this. So I asked Donald John in the class the next day, and he said, yeah, I've actually done loads of reading on this. And he just gave me so much information. And I was like, here am I, reading all these books on covenant theology, thinking I'm getting smart, and I don't know anything, but there are people who've been doing this who are far ahead of us. And then it's not just the staff. One thing I regularly say is that while I may be better than some of my classmates at Hebrew, there are so many of these guys who are much further ahead of me theologically. And it just makes you quiet and just makes you just listen to them. Because, yeah, if you think you know it all, then you're just going to be talking a lot. And you're not going to be learning anything. And you're not going to be able to be helpful to people. So that when it comes into, I guess, when 20 years down the line, when Lord willing, I'm ministering in the church context, if I don't know the answer because I wasn't listening, then how am I going to be able to help somebody who is actually struggling with something? Whereas all this time ago, I was just chatting about theology and just saying, yeah, have you read Charles Hodge? Have you read Burkhoff on this? Have you read this and that? And just to wax eloquent and feel like I'm smart. That's not the point of it. And so bringing those things together, thinking that's the goal is pastoral ministry. Theology should lead us to that. One thing our professors always say, Calvin was a minister and his theology was for his congregation. Same with Luther, same with all these people. Theology wasn't just supposed to be an office job where there's no contact with the real world, but the shepherd should smell like his sheep. And I just think of all these things, and that keeps you thinking, okay, I'm not getting to a place where I'm going to feel like I'm so smart and I know what it's about. But I'm trying to just get into the word so I can bring out the Lord Jesus Christ to the people who really need him, who, Lord willing, will be the people that I'm shepherding. So.
There's a bigger, wider discussion here, but I do think that, we would all say, theology, almost like theology has needs to be like practiced or a practical element to it. It's incomplete if it doesn't go anywhere other than just head knowledge. You just go, oh yeah, I understand this great concept of the Trinity. You're like, that's great. So does Satan. Like, right. Like it needs to get somewhere. But I think the other aspect of that seems to probably be missing with the rise of the internet and things like that is that divorcing of theology from a local context. And I think that's what you're sort of driving at there, that not only is theology practical, which we would argue it is, but if you think about it, that practical element needs in a sense, a local area for it to be practiced in. So kind of the conference speaking, the podcast, we're doing a podcast, I know, right? Okay, sorry. But
because it's not enough.
It's not enough. Yeah. And I think that practical element for theology would that would be the humbling aspect. If all you do is, like if this was all that we did with theology and we weren't ministers and students and interns, and you could see the danger of that. And I think that is the danger. Whereas, if you don't smell like your sheep, if you're not actually putting that into practice, you start to see the complexities of humans, of your own heart, of all. And it's like seminary should be training you to that end, to use theology. And I go that one step further in a local setting, in a practical local setting, because I would say that's the New Testament view of it, the training into, it's just where half the New Testament is to a local church.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think there's a middle step in there as well, which is about what it does to you, not just in skills and knowledge, which is important, so you are learning stuff and you are getting skills, like you've learned a bunch of stuff, and then how different that is to preparing a sermon. So having just lots and lots of theological information, lots of knowledge about Mark's gospel or whatever it is you're preaching on, but saying, okay, with all this knowledge, how do you develop that and package that so that you are giving something digestible to the congregation that's applicable? But there's another thing about, ideally anyway, is your godliness. I remember right at the beginning when I started studying theology, before I went to seminary, one of the tutors said, as a minister, he got a letter from a schoolgirl saying, dear sir, this term at school we're doing God, please can you send leaflets? And he was saying, when it comes to studying theology, you start wondering who's studying who. So when I was doing civil engineering, we'd look at concrete or structures, whatever it is, we studying that. But when you're studying God, sometimes you get this feeling that I'm the one being studied, that there's someone looking back at me. And sometimes it's deeply challenging. I found sometimes it's really comforting because there's something I had, my experience of so I did a preaching course called the Cornhill Training Course years and years ago. Then I went to Oak Hill, later did this master's course that Westminster used to do through London Seminary. And every time my experience is this, and I get this at conferences as well, is someone speaking and I just go, look around the room and then look around and go, so just me then that was learning that for the first time. But there is that, sometimes it's humbling in that sense. Sometimes it's convicting. There's areas that you aren't perfect, but you just let go. And then in the middle of a lecture on church history or whatever it is, going through Hebrew verbs, and you sort of go, I've got to change. There's things that I've just not been addressing, that this bit of scripture, this bit of God's word, just a throwaway remark that someone's made, I've got to do some repentance or whatever it might be. And I think that's a weird thing that I'm guessing didn't happen in economics. And obviously you don't want to put too much burden on the seminaries. You can't blame them for everything. Yeah. But obviously over the last few years, we've seen people with good theology fall into all kinds of scandals and things. Yeah. So there needs to be some kind of, and I guess that as people are thinking about seminary, is to say, is this seminary going to hold me to account? So I found the body of students had a kind of positive effect on me, but also some of the lecturers would also ask you awkwardly personal questions, and that should kind of happen. You use the word intensive, but I suppose it should be an intensive spiritual thing as well. But yeah, so it's all part of the development.
Yeah, I think well. That's why it's important also to be doing seminary in the context of the local church. I'm not saying that everything it's gearing towards the local church, but for our seminary, a lot of the students are online, and so they can't have the one-on-one conversations with some of the faculty members. But a lot of the students who are online are also doing internships at their church, being discipled by their pastors and having those conversations with their pastors. And that's something that, you can't divorce the spiritual life from the books. I mean, that's where some people fall, as you're saying, and that's where people might go to seminary and they'll fill their mind with all the books, but they're neglecting the word of God because they've got all this reading to do. And seminary is a lot of work, and it's so much to do. But you can't your personal walk with God. I mean, what's the point of getting A's and all the good marks and everything, and then you're just not actually walking with the Lord? That's got to come first. You've got to put your walk with God first. I think that's why it's so important to do your seminary training in the context of the local church, and that's another added benefit about being, I think, in person in seminary is being with the brothers and actually having those conversations with them as well, and saying, hey, how do you walk with the Lord? What's your routine? How do you read the Bible? How do you lead your family in worship and all these sorts of things? And let's talk about that.
Because people can be very negative. So I think there's I suppose what we've touched on is we've talked about the blessings of seminary, and we've talked about perhaps some of the challenges, and some people are very negative about seminary. I remember actually a former principal, so he would make a big thing about you should go to seminary, but choose it well. And he made a comment that was it the degrees in theology are decorative paving slabs on the road to hell, was his comment. So if you go to the wrong seminary or you go in with the wrong attitude, and obviously we know about university degrees in theology, and there's some modules that are probably really interesting and perhaps quite useful, but the way theology degrees at university are put together is a bit like an engineering degree or an economics degree. Here are 12 subjects that are vaguely interesting. I guess in seminary, you're thinking about how do these subjects relate to each other, and how do they prepare you for the work on the ground and serving the church. But some people are and like we've said, there are people who are great pastors who have mixture of self-taught and learned from other great ministers around them, and they're doing a pretty good job. And maybe God just hardwired them that way. I don't think I would be able to have done that. But some people are very negative about seminary because it is, they would argue, sanitizing God. It's too intellectual.
Academic. I mean, is it too academic and not heart related? And I think
just get out and do it kind of thing. Yeah.
And I mean, I think there obviously any type of criticism, there's truth in that. I think it's Herman Bavinck comments on his doctoral studies and I think it injured his heart, if you will. His doctoral studies hurt his spirituality slightly. And I think I'm remembering this correctly. If someone's a Bavinck scholar and I've got everything wrong, please comment. I'm happy to be corrected. And in some sense, it's like, as you said, Darren, sometimes it's not the seminary's fault. Sometimes it's the student's fault. But there is a sense of also choosing a right seminary, one that is focused on the academic side, but not exclusively to the detriment of your heart. I went to Erskine Theological Seminary, small little seminary in the middle of nowhere, South Carolina. But I still remember we had an ice storm where I was. So I was driving 2.5 hours. So I did the opposite of what you did, Tomi. One way to get to seminary. Massive ice storm. I had an intensive week-long class on creeds and confessions, and I couldn't make it down. Emailed the professor, and he just goes, "You have a wife and a kid. Stay home. You'll be fine."
Yeah.
And, just thought, and this was the same professor who just regularly pray and ask about how we're doing and pray directly for us. And, you could just tell the care he had for students, and that though he was teaching church history, he thought it vital and wanted to see us engaged and prepared for lifelong ministry. And I still remember him to this day.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think also there are, it's a bit like the BBC. If they mentioned anything, they always say there are other products available. So we're saying there are other seminaries available. And I think because when I went to seminary, I was going as a Church of England ordinand, so my options were limited there with the criteria I was bringing. But I think that it's probably fair to say that when you look around, there are strengths and weaknesses in all of them.
Yeah.
And so there are, so some of them you do more subjects, but you're not going to go into so much depth. Others you are going to do fewer, you're going to go into more depth. Some are going to be stronger on languages or whatever it is. Sometimes I remember one minister saying he picked to go to Cranmer Hall in Durham because of one lecturer who was just brilliant. And as soon as he arrived, the guy left to go to another country. So you probably don't want it to all hang on one person. But yeah, so I suppose you go with your eyes open, don't you, that you're not going to get everything from any seminary. Mm-hmm. And they've got their things that are their strengths and their weaknesses, but are they aiming to equip you? Are they going to challenge you in your godliness? Do they have the church as part of their focus? And, some skip to the practical, don't they? So they kind of almost too quickly want to go. Sinclair Ferguson apparently says, or used to say, practical theology is great, but it is practical theology. You've got to do the theology bit to make it practical, rather than leaping to it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that At least with Westminster, everything's great. No, with Westminster Seminary, I mean, obviously, I'm grateful. I love it, and I tell a lot of people about it. And I've obviously said a lot of the benefits there and how it does help you and form you for pastoral ministry. But there obviously are. I mean, it's nothing is perfect on this side of eternity, and some difficulties. Apart, well, I mean, the biggest difficulty for me is just how much work there is. But that's part and parcel with it. If I could change one thing, it would be to have more time to read. It would be more time to study, but I think that would be the case everywhere. I can distinctly remember. The good thing about this is what I'll say is I can distinctly remember imagine this is my first year, first semester, right? And it's already crumbling down. But in my first year and first semester, I was just at seminary, and everybody had gone home, and it was 9 p.m. and I'm just there on my knees praying, like, Lord, how am I supposed to understand this Hebrew language? You know, and I'm like, how am I supposed to do Hebrew? But it's amazing because while I'm struggling with all this work, it makes me go, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this in my own strength. Maybe I'm actually supposed to be relying on the Lord. Yeah. Maybe that's actually the whole point of this. And so there's that. And I say some of that in jest, but it is a lot of hard work and everything. There are some courses that you think, do I need to do that? I'd rather focus on this. I'd rather focus on that thing. But no, it's not an elective. You have to do that to complete the course, which is fair enough. I don't know what pastoral ministry is like yet, so I'm not sure how that is all going to play into this. But I think one thing that we do is we just, as brothers in the seminary, we just get our head down and we just encourage one another and we just say, yeah, let's just get it done. Nothing is going to this. It's not easy. It is hard work. I didn't finish my first degree when I was studying in Newcastle University, but I look back on the years that I did do, and I think that was way easier than what I'm doing right now. It was so much easier than what I'm doing right now. But this is the beauty of it. I mean, I didn't finish those ones. I didn't enjoy them, but I'm really enjoying these ones. Looking forward to, Lord willing, finishing over the next couple of years, because I can see where this is going to take me into the ministry. I can see how this is going to be able to serve the people of God. And I'm really, really enjoying it. But with all the books that I've got to read for seminary, one benefit of being single in seminary is I can also read other books as well.
Wow.
Guys are like, I don't know how you read all this stuff. I'm like, guys, you guys have got wives, you guys have got kids. I understand why you can't, but I'm here and I've got other stuff that I enjoy reading. So it's like the theology doesn't just stay in the seminary training, but it's an interest. It's something that I'm just so blessed that I'm able to continue studying throughout the year, other topics, and then also, Lord willing, that will set me up for the future as well. So
yeah, I'm sure it will.
Yeah, we feel like now we got to do like a third interview when you graduate and in pastoral ministry to say, okay, how did this all work?
Yeah.
But as we're getting closer to time, thought it'd be good to kind of, as wrapping it up, to say, okay, so we've heard some of the benefits. Obviously, there's some downsides to the right seminary, but I think it'd be great, Tomi, just to hear, after your time in seminary thus far, kind of what are your thoughts, just in a summary of why should you go to seminary? You know, sort of what you're doing on your Instagram just now. What are your thoughts? Why should men go to seminary?
Yes. Why should you go to seminary? So I'm imagining having a conversation with myself a couple of years ago, doubtful about whether to go to seminary. Tomi, why should I go to seminary? You've been going for a couple of years. What is it about seminary? And what would I say? I'd say, bro, you're at that stage in my life, and I was at my previous church, I was one of the guys that knew the Bible well, and I was reading theology of my own time and all that sort of stuff. So I thought I was pretty smart. I would say that there's just so much more that you can learn, and that you won't necessarily learn, at least this early on in this stage of your life, unless you're actually seeking out, looking for hard things to learn. So, for instance, what I mean, Greek. If you told me learn Greek, I would say, yeah, I'll learn Greek, and I'll probably watch a couple of Greek classes online, and then I'd get distracted with something else. and focus on wherever my interest lies. But having to do Greek week in, week out, having to prepare for a test every week, having to do all this, is actually making me learn and prepare the language now for the future in a way that I wouldn't do so. Maybe because I just wasn't as disciplined enough, maybe because my mind wasn't, I wasn't just as interested in that topic. I'm sure that there are many people who have done it by themselves. In fact, I know there are people at church who have done it by themselves. But for the way that I was wired, it is the discipline of going to seminary means that you learn a lot. There's also the discipleship from the faculty members. These are godly men who are teaching you. They're not just teaching you theology in the abstract. These are elders in their churches, and they have preaching and ministering experience, and they disciple their flock, and they look after the people of God and teach them and help them. And they're doing that to you as well. And they're opening your eyes and saying, hey, have you considered this? This is something that you should think about when you're balancing your life with seminary. What are your priorities and all these sorts of things? I think that if I had stayed just reading myself, I would have continued being discipled by the pastor that I was at the church I was going to. But I think having more, well, I guess it was unique because my church was only one elder. So I only had one person speaking into my life. But having my pastor at my church in the same denomination helps, obviously. And then going to the seminary with men and professors across the denomination who are also able to speak into my life and who I'm also able to build friendships and relationships with, that helps so much in terms of your formation as a man of God. And then as well, I think another thing that's related to that is just also building those friendships and relationships beyond just, okay, this man is going to speak into my life. What can I gain from our relationship? It's just my professors are also, Lord willing, I'm going to be ministering alongside of them, and I'm going to be able to just chat with them and just sit down and meet up and discuss ministry and pray for one another and these sorts of things. And now that I've recently come under care of EPQ, and I'm seeing some of my professors in the room, I'm like, oh, this isn't just, he's not just my teacher. He actually is an elder. He actually is ministering in the church. And this is where I want to go. And he's been through what I've been through, and he's able to teach me and to guide me. And we're also able to build a long-lasting friendship by God's grace there. And so it's kind of, in one sense, it's networking in a sense, but beyond that, it's just friendship and relationship building. And then I would probably say as well that, well, like what I mentioned earlier about being a lone ranger, I don't know, I was a lone ranger, and I'm so glad I'm not a lone ranger anymore. I'm so grateful for the men of God in our seminary that I get to talk to all the time, the friendships and relationships I built with them. We pray for one another regularly. We listen to each other preach. We give each other feedback on each other's preaching, and we help each other in whatever area that we're struggling in our studies. And then it's just such a blessing to be able to do that. So all of that, and then to top it off as well, theology is, well, as I was saying, it's not it is pastoral, and learning that from seminary, it's not something that I necessarily understood before joining seminary. I think before joining seminary, my thoughts were learn theology, preach, and then kind of sit down. Learn theology, preach, sit down, let the word do the work. You don't have to get in there, just let the word do the work. Which is true, of course, let the word do the work. But I think that what I've learned now is that everything should be geared towards the well-being of the local church and the glory of God. Yeah, I think that I would say to myself, look, seminary isn't some esoteric thing. It's not just a heady, you're going to read all these books and learn, but it's lived out, it's practical, and you're going to learn to be a godly man in this setting. You're going to learn to shepherd the flock of God. One more thing I'll say, actually, and this is kind of what you've been saying, I think, the two of you, about how it kind of forms a foundation. It doesn't teach you everything. I'll just use this one example. We had a latter prophets course earlier this semester, and it was from Isaiah to Malachi. Right. So we obviously didn't finish all the books. Okay. There's so much stuff to do, and we had it. It was an intensive, it was a week-long thing. It was excellent. But what that did for me was it made me say, wow, I really want to study the Bible. I really want to get into the Word of God. And so I'll show you actually. I've been going through this book about Isaiah. I've got some more about Isaiah, and it's that course. Previously to doing that course, I would have, I've done the Gospel and Acts course, and I thought, okay, I've studied the Gospel and Acts. That's great. Now I'm ready to go and preach it and not study it again. But the Latter Prophets course showed me that, no, this is actually just giving you a foundation. You are now primed and ready to go a lot deeper than that foundation that you've got right now. And that's one thing that seminary that's probably one of the biggest things that seminary has taught me and been a blessing to me about. It's that you're learning, you're setting the foundation, but there's so much more to go. It's that corridor analogy. You open that door, and then there's so many more doors. And thank God for all those doors, because it means it's a lifelong of study and a lifelong of learning for God's glory.
I don't think I could say anything better. Any last thoughts, Darren? Or
no, that's a great way to end it. It's building up things. So sometimes things set you up for you to go a bit deeper. And also on the other side, I was ordained in 2001, and I've been a minister in 2 churches, and an assistant minister in another. And so you preach through a series, and then you go, now I know how to preach through it. And then 10 years later, you preach through the same book, and you go, no, now I know how to. And so it's an ongoing process, and it's just encouraging seeing you at this stage, and see you getting formed is brilliant. So,
well, thank you, Tomi. This has been great. It's kind of funny. Yep, me and Darren both hearing your story thought, this would be a good podcast. And for once, Darren and I were right. It was a great podcast.
Yeah.
It was great. So it's great to have you on. Love to catch up sometime, down the road, see how more things are going. Yeah. And we'll put some links to your Instagram so people can kind of get that nice little window into seminary. Post some links to Westminster Seminary UK for anyone who goes, whatever Tomi said sounds great. I want to be there tomorrow. Really with that, just want to say, thanks. It's wonderful to hear that serving the church to the glory of God. I mean, I feel like that's where we end it.
Good place.
So with that, thanks for listening, everyone. And we'll be back again with more stuff later on. Thanks, men.
Thank you. Goodbye.